A deadly challenge. Captain Kairos adjusted the resolution on his observation screen, his talons clicking against the console. The barren, wind-scoured surface of Zolax 9 filled the viewer, every jagged rock and swirling dust devil rendered in vivid detail. It was, without a doubt, one of the most inhospitable environments the Galactic Exploratory Alliance had ever encountered. And now, against all logic and precedent, they were sending a human to try to survive there. Alone. "Remind me again," Lieutenant Zyfax said, his scales flushing an anxious shade of green, "why are we allowing this? It seems cruel, even for a Deathworlder." Kairos rumbled thoughtfully. "High Command wants to understand human adaptability. Their species has spread further and faster than any other in the GEA. By sending one to die on Zolax 9? Zyfax shook his wedge-shaped head. "We've lost entire teams on that cursed rock." "That's the point," Kairos said. "If a human can survive there, even briefly, it will redefine what we think is possible." He leaned back, watching the blinking telemetry of the human's landing pod as it descended through the caustic atmosphere. The occupant, one Zara Riven, had an impressive service record, even by the standards of Earth's exobiology core. But Zolax 9 had a way of breaking even the strongest. The pod's icon flashed red as it hit the surface, and for a moment, Kairos feared the worst. But then the hatch indicator turned green. She'd survived the landing, at least. The screen flickered, then resolved into the feed from Zara's suit cameras as she climbed out of the wreckage of her pod. Kairos' first impression was of piercing gray eyes in a dark, angular face, her expression a mixture of determination and something almost like excitement. "Zara Riven, Exobiology Core," she said, her voice crackling over the comm mission log, Day 1. "I've arrived on Zolax 9. Pod's a wreck, but I've salvaged my basic kit." She panned her head, giving Kairos and his team a view of the shattered landscape surrounding her. Jagged obsidian spires pierced a seething sky, while the ground was a churning mass of razor-sharp volcanic glass. And that was just the terrain. Zolax 9's weather and wildlife were even more deadly. "Conditions about as welcoming as expected," Zara continued wryly. "Atmosphere's a delightful mix of chlorine and sulfur, surface temp is a balmy 50 Celsius, and I've got about an hour before the first pyroclastic storm hits." She grinned fiercely into the camera. "Better get to work." With that, she strode off into the alien hellscape, an island of fragile human life amid the roiling chaos. Her suit's environmental reading scrolled down the side of Kairos' screen, a litany of dangers. But Zara herself seemed almost casual, humming softly as she picked her way across the treacherous terrain. "She's crazy," Zyfax muttered. "No sane creature would set foot on that planet, let alone try to survive there." "Maybe that's what makes humans so successful," Kairos mused. "They don't just endure the impossible. They challenge it." He watched as Zara paused, kneeling to examine a twisted outcropping of rock. Her suit's analyzers whirred, and a moment later, a new line of data appeared on Kairos' screen: volcanic glass, 90% silica, 10% tungsten. Extremely sharp. Potential use: tools, weapons. Kairos blinked in surprise. She'd been on the surface for mere minutes, and already she was finding ways to turn Zolax 9's dangers to her advantage. "High Command is not going to believe this," he murmured. As if in response, Zara straightened, a shard of obsidian gripped in her gloved hand. She raised it towards the toxic sky like a salute. "Zara Riven, Mission Log Addendum," she said. "Local minerals have potential. This chunk of glass. On Earth, we call this an opportunity." With a final fierce grin, she stowed the makeshift tool and set off again, striding purposefully into the deadly unknown. On the observation deck, light years away, Kairos and his team could only watch in astonished silence as the lone human figure moved across the screen, the first living thing to walk the surface of Zolax 9. It was a moment that would redefine their understanding of the Deathworlders, and the indomitable power of the human spirit. But for Zara, it was just the beginning. She had a mission: to survive, to explore, to push the very limits of the possible. And woe to any force in the universe, be it storm or monster or alien planet, that tried to stand in her way. Adapting to adversity. The first night on Zolax 9 was a brutal lesson in the planet's hostility. As the sun set, the temperature plummeted from scorching to sub-zero in a matter of minutes. The volcanic glass that covered the surface contracted and shattered, filling the air with a razor-sharp crystalline dust. In her makeshift shelter, hastily constructed from the wreckage of her landing pod, Zara Riven fought to adapt. Her suit's life support strained against the cold and the caustic atmosphere, while the shrieking of the wind outside made sleep impossible. But Zara was no stranger to adversity. As the long, dark hours ticked by, she set to work, her mind racing with plans and possibilities. Using her suit's analyzers, she identified a type of bioluminescent lichen clinging to the rocks, which reacted to the heat of her shelter's jury-rigged power cell. It wasn't much, but it cast a soft, eerie glow, a tiny oasis of light in the crushing darkness. Next, she turned her attention to the problem of food and water. Her emergency rations wouldn't last long, and Zolax 9's surface was a toxic wasteland. But Zara had a hunch. She'd noticed strange bubbles rising from the cracks in the planet's crust, pockets of gas that her suit's sensors couldn't identify. With careful maneuvering, she managed to capture one in a makeshift container cobbled together from pod debris. To her surprise, the analysis came back as nitrogen and oxygen, with trace amounts of water vapor. It was a tiny pocket of almost breathable air, rising from some unknown depth. "Life finds a way," Zara murmured, a smile tugging at her chapped lips. As the first pale light of dawn crept across the jagged horizon, Zara emerged from her shelter, battered but unbowed. Her suit was scuffed and stained, her face haggard behind her visor. But her eyes gleamed with a fierce, undaunted determination. The aliens watching from orbit were stunned. They'd expected the human to barely survive the night, if at all. But not only was she alive, she looked ready to take on the planet itself. Over the next several days, Zara pushed herself to the limits, scouring the hostile landscape for any resource she could use. She rigged a rudimentary moisture collector from the pod's filtration system, gathering precious drops of water from the toxic air. From the shards of volcanic glass, she fashioned crude but effective tools: a knife, a spear, a hammer. And everywhere she went, she collected samples, gathering data on Zolax 9's bizarre and deadly biosphere. It was a grueling, dangerous existence, fraught with 1,000 ways to die. But Zara seemed to thrive on the challenge. Each setback only spurred her to greater ingenuity, greater resilience. For the watching aliens, it was a revelation. They'd always seen humans as crude, brutish creatures, scrabbling for survival on the margins of the galaxy. But as they watched Zara, they began to understand the true power of the Deathworlders, not just their physical toughness. Turning the tables. Zara Riven was in trouble. A massive solar flare, unpredicted by any of her suit sensors, had slammed into Zolax 9's atmosphere, igniting a storm of unimaginable ferocity. Gale-force winds lashed the planet's surface, hurling shards of volcanic glass like shrapnel. The air crackled with electromagnetic energy, shorting out systems and setting the very ground ablaze. In the midst of this chaos, Zara struggled to reach the shelter of a nearby cave system. She'd been out scouting when the storm hit, and now every step was a battle. Her suit's shielding was failing, its alarms blaring in her ears as the hostile atmosphere seeped in. Just as she reached the mouth of the cave, a bolt of lightning split the sky, striking the ground mere feet from where she stood. The shock wave hurled her against the jagged rock, and she felt something snap in her leg. Pain lanced through her, hot and brutal. For a moment, she lay there, gasping, her suit's diagnostics flashing red across her visor. Broken tibia. Suit integrity compromised. Oxygen levels critical. It would have been easy to give up then, to let the planet claim her. But Zara Riven had not come this far to die in a hole on an alien world. Gritting her teeth, she dragged herself deeper into the cave, every movement an agony. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe. Her vision blurred, and she tasted blood in her mouth. But then, as she rounded a bend in the passage, she saw something that made her heart leap. Mushrooms. Glowing, phosphorescent fungi, clinging to the damp walls of the cave. And where there were mushrooms, there was moisture, and organic matter. With the last of her strength, Zara crawled to the nearest patch and plunged her hand into the spongy mass. The mushrooms released a cloud of glowing spores, and she breathed them in deeply, feeling a tingling warmth spread through her chest. To her amazement, the pain in her leg began to recede, replaced by a strange, prickling sensation. She looked down and saw, through her torn suit, that the mushroom spores were settling on her skin, knitting together in a luminous, living cast. Zara Riven, mission log, she rasped, her voice rough with pain and wonder. I think I've found something incredible. Over the next hours, as the storm raged outside, Zara studied the strange fungi. Her suit's analyzers were badly damaged, but they could still detect the basics, a complex matrix of bioactive compounds, with potent regenerative properties. Using her makeshift tools, Zara harvested the mushrooms, grinding them into a glowing paste that she applied to her wounds. Slowly, miraculously, she began to heal. But the true breakthrough came when she tried mixing the mushroom extract with the remnants of her suit's power cells. To her astonishment, the fungi seemed to absorb and amplify the energy, glowing brighter and brighter until the entire cave was bathed in a soft, pulsing light. It was like nothing any human had ever seen, a living, organic technology, born of the very forces that had nearly killed her. And in that moment, Zara knew that she had found something that could change everything. As the storm finally abated, Zara emerged from the cave, limping but alive. Her suit hung in tatters, fused with glowing tendrils of fungus. But her eyes were bright, her face split by a fierce, triumphant grin. Mission log, addendum, she said. I think it's time we re-evaluate this planet. Zolax 9 isn't just hostile, it's a treasure trove. And I'm going to crack it wide open. High above, in orbit, the aliens watched in stunned disbelief as the human they'd written off as dead strode out into the ravaged landscape, aglow with a strange, living light. It was a sight they would never forget, the moment when Zara Riven turned the tables on Zolax 9, and showed the galaxy the true potential of the Deathworlders. No matter what the universe threw at them, humans would always find a way. Not just to survive, but to thrive. And the rest of the galaxy was about to find out just what that meant. Dangerous encounter. Armed with her new discovery, Zara Riven set out to explore Zolax 9 with renewed vigor. The bioluminescent fungi, which she dubbed Zolician Ghostlight, had not only saved her life but opened up a world of possibilities. By cultivating the ghostlight in carefully controlled conditions, Zara found she could shape its growth, creating living structures that were both resilient and adaptable. She wove the glowing tendrils into her suit, crafting a symbiotic armor that could heal itself and adapt to the planet's harsh conditions. With each passing day, Zara ventured further into the unexplored regions of Zolax 9, her ghostlight suit a beacon in the darkness. She discovered vast underground networks of caves, filled with strange and wondrous lifeforms that had evolved to thrive in the planet's extreme environments. But Zolax 9 had not earned its deadly reputation lightly. As Zara pushed deeper into the wilderness, she knew she was testing her luck. It was in the depths of an ancient lava tube that she finally met her match. She was collecting samples of a particularly luminous strain of ghostlight when she heard it, a low, guttural growl that echoed through the cavern like distant thunder. Zara froze, her hand tightening on her makeshift spear. She knew that sound. She'd heard it before, on a dozen different worlds, the hunting call of an apex predator. Slowly, she turned, her suit's sensors straining to penetrate the gloom. And there, in the shadows, she saw it, a monstrous creature, all fangs and claws and rippling, bioluminescent scales. It was a Zolician dreadmaw, the undisputed king of the planet's food chain. Twice the size of a human, with jaws that could crush titanium, it was a living nightmare, perfectly evolved to kill. And it was stalking straight towards Zara. For a heartbeat, Zara felt a stab of pure, primal terror. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to get as far away from this monster as possible. But Zara Riven was not prey. She was a Deathworlder, a child of Earth. And she would not go down without a fight. As the dreadmaw charged, Zara met it head-on, her spear leveled at its gaping maw. The creature's jaws snapped shut inches from her face, the force of its bite shattering the haft of her weapon. But Zara was already moving, ducking under the creature's slashing claws and rolling to the side. She came up with a fistful of ghostlight spores, which she flung into the dreadmaw's eyes. The effect was immediate and devastating. The spores reacted violently with the creature's bioluminescent scales, igniting in a burst of searing, blinding light. The dreadmaw howled in agony, thrashing blindly as it tried to clear its vision. Zara didn't hesitate. She leapt onto the creature's back, her hands finding the gaps in its armored hide. With a savage cry, she plunged her hands into the dreadmaw's flesh, pumping it full of ghostlight spores. The creature convulsed, its body shuddering as the fungi spread through its system like wildfire. Glowing tendrils erupted from its scales, wrapping around it in a suffocating cocoon. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The dreadmaw collapsed, its body still twitching as the ghost light consumed it from within. Zara stood over the fallen titan, her chest heaving, her suit glowing with an eerie, pulsing light. She'd just taken down the most deadly creature on Zolax 9 with nothing but her wits and a handful of mushrooms. Zara Riven, mission log, she panted, a wild grin spreading across her face. I think I just became the apex predator. Light years away, in the observation room, Captain Kairos and his team could only stare in slack-jawed amazement. They'd just witnessed the impossible, a human, not only surviving but thriving on the deadliest planet in the known universe. And as they watched Zara Riven stand tall among the glowing remnants of her kill, they knew they were seeing the future, a future where the Deathworlders would take their rightful place among the stars, not as victims or scavengers, but as the undisputed masters of the galaxy. The legend of Zara Riven, the woman who tamed Zolax 9, was only just beginning. And the universe would never be the same. A new perspective. As the days turned into weeks, Zara Riven's mastery over Zolax 9 only grew. Using the ghostlight fungi as a foundation, she built a thriving base of operations, a glowing oasis in the midst of the planet's hostile wilderness. She tapped into the planet's geothermal vents to power her equipment, and cultivated vast underground gardens of bioluminescent flora to provide food and oxygen. She even managed to domesticate some of Zolax 9's less aggressive fauna, creating a menagerie of glowing, symbiotic creatures that followed her like loyal pets. To the watching aliens, it was a staggering achievement. Zara hadn't just survived Zolax 9, she'd tamed it, bending the planet's deadly ecosystems to her will. But Zara's impact went far beyond her own survival. As she continued to explore and study the planet, she made discoveries that had the potential to revolutionize fields from medicine to materials science. The regenerative properties of the ghostlight fungi alone were a medical marvel, with implications for treating everything from physical trauma to degenerative diseases. And the unique properties of Zolician lifeforms, adapted to thrive in the planet's extreme conditions, hinted at new frontiers in bioengineering and sustainable technology. Zara documented everything, her suit's cameras and sensors capturing a wealth of data that she beamed back to the orbiting research vessel. It was a scientific treasure trove, the kind of haul that could launch 1,000 research projects and redefine entire fields of study. But for Zara, the greatest reward was the change she saw in her alien observers. When she'd first arrived on Zolax 9, they'd seen her as little more than a curiosity, a primitive creature to be studied and pitted. Now, as they watched her work miracles on a daily basis, their attitudes had shifted. They spoke to her as an equal, a fellow explorer and scientist pushing the boundaries of the known. They marveled at her ingenuity, her tenacity, her unbreakable spirit in the face of impossible odds. In Zara Riven, they saw the best of humanity, the drive to explore, to discover, to push beyond the limits of what was thought possible. And they began to understand that the Deathworlders were not a threat to be feared, but a force to be reckoned with, an ally in the grand adventure of the cosmos. As her mission on Zolax 9 drew to a close, Zara stood atop the highest peak of her base, looking out over the glowing, teeming landscape that she'd made her own. In her hand, she held a makeshift flag, woven from the luminous fibers of the ghostlight fungi. With a grin, she planted the flag in the rocky soil, the eerie light casting her features in a determined glow. Zara Riven, final mission log, she said, her voice ringing with pride and purpose. Zolax 9 is no longer a death world. It's a new frontier, a stepping stone to the stars. And this is just the beginning. She turned to face the orbiting research vessel, her eyes shining with the light of 1,000 possibilities. We are human, she said, her voice carrying across the light years. We are explorers, discoverers, dreamers. We face the unknown with courage and curiosity, and we make the impossible possible. She grinned, her face a beacon of hope and challenge in the alien light. So what's next, universe? Where do we go from here? Because one thing's for sure, wherever we go, whatever we find, humanity will be there, leading the way. And nothing, not even the deadliest planet in the cosmos, is going to stop us. With those words, Zara Riven stepped into history, not just as the conqueror of Zolax 9, but as a symbol of the indomitable human spirit, a guiding light for a galaxy that would never be the same. And in the observation room, light years away, Captain Kairos and his team could only marvel at the raw potential of these Deathworlders, these fragile yet unbreakable beings who dared to dream beyond the stars. The future was human. And it was only just beginning.